Hey folks, I'm Sean C. Davis, and I had to give a conference talk earlier this week. And to prepare for that, I did something a little bit different than I've ever done before, and it went incredibly well. And I want to tell you about it. So let's take a look over here. Okay, so I have these slides prepared, and they're applying my evolving brand, and in my opinion, they look pretty good. I'm really happy with them. And what I'm happiest about is that I had to put very little effort into them actually coming together. Now, I have another video where I have recorded myself going through and actually giving this presentation if you want to listen to it. And I did that primarily because this conference was a little bit of a mess, and I actually didn't even get to give this talk at the conference. I didn't know what I was talking about until a couple days before the conference. I never really got told when I should show up and where I should be. It was kind of a disaster. And then instead of me giving a talk, which they told me I was going to do, I sat down and had to be part of a panel. It was weird, but I'm glad I have this, and I recorded this other video where I go through it. So if you want to see that content, check out that other video. But what I want to talk about today is the process I followed so that I went from not knowing what I was talking about 48 hours before a conference to having something that felt really polished, both visually, but also I felt practiced. And it came together without spending a ton of time, at least without spending hours and hours practicing. I did practice several times, but it didn't take up all of several days leading up to it, which is usually what happens when I prepare for presentations like this. So here's what I did. I already have this pipeline that I work with Claude on. And basically, Claude, through MCP servers, has access to my Notion, GitHub, and a few other outlets where it can see the work that I've done recently. And we use that to work together to form different topics and ideas on what I should share content about. And as I was coming up on this conference, I thought, I should repurpose this same sort of workflow to try to come up with an idea if the conference won't tell me which of my ideas they picked, and they didn't. So I did this, and we kind of went back and forth in ideas on the things that I have been interested in and building around recently. And eventually I narrowed it down to a topic that I wanted to talk about. And then instead of going further, once I had identified the topic, I stopped and I stepped away. And I have this app that I really like called Voicenotes. It's voicenotes.com. And so I put the headphones on, put the mic on, took a walk, and I basically just rambled. I gave the talk without any preparation. And the way I would recommend that you do that sort of thing is you kind of, maybe you make some loose notes, but don't think too much about it. Make it supernatural. Make it supernatural. But yeah, just take a walk, sit down, however your brain gets rolling, and essentially just talk about the subject and talk for a little bit longer than your allotted time. So I had 15 minutes, and I kind of just talked through the topics that I wanted to cover over the course of about 20 to 25 minutes or so. And then Voicenotes gives me the transcription, but if you're working with Claude, you probably could use some service or ChatGPT or whatever and get the audio file to be transcribed in some way. But ultimately, you've got that text, and then you send that text back to the agent. So that's what I did. I had the brain dump, sent that to Claude, and then Claude is like, cool, I see what you're getting at. These things seem like they're noise. You only have 15 minutes, so let's tighten it up. Here's the flow I would suggest, and here are the slides I would suggest. So that's what we did. We ended up with an outline and with slides. And rather than trying to pick that apart, I made a few comments, but it's really easy to take something like that and end up in a rabbit hole for a long time. And so instead of doing that, I said, you know what? I'm just going to record. So build me the slide deck. And we talked a little bit about the architecture, and I think that's something that you have to do at least once. You've got to get that foundation in place, and then you can iterate on it. And we didn't have that yet. And so we talked through that for a little bit and decided that we would use a tool called Slidev, which, by the way, if you haven't used it, very cool. It's sli.dev. And the reason I like this is because it is a presentation framework and it's built on Vue. And Claude is particularly adept at writing code. And so it can just move really fast. And anything you really want to do, as long as you can do it with code, you can do it for this presentation. And that is hugely powerful. So highly recommend this or something like this if you're going to use an agent to build you a presentation. And so once I had that first build, then I could get into this iteration loop. So I took the first build and the first thing I did, I will say, before I even tried to speak on it, I should have just jumped right in and tried to speak on it. But I care so much about the visuals that I decided to do a little bit of visual tweaking. So really what I should do here should have had kind of an interim step of, all right, this is really messy. I want to kind of tighten up the visuals first, but that's also, to be honest, that feels like a distraction. So what we did was this first build, and then I had Claude deploy it to Netlify. So we've got it in production. So it's not just, hey, we're conceptualizing this. It's also, it's already deployed. It's already available on the web. It's already in the state it's going to be when I give the presentation. And I love working in that way. So we're on Netlify. So what I did, started the timer and I started to talk through it. And then at the end, I went back to Claude and I said, okay, it took me 18 minutes, so it's too long. We need to decide where to cut. I had my opinions, but I didn't actually share those opinions right away. The opinions I did share were very much about visuals. And I was like, these are the things I think we should clean up, and it's too long. So Claude says, all right, here's what I think we should do. We go back and forth a little bit. Said, I think we should cut slide 14 first, 13 second, and then give the talk again and see what time you end up at. So we make those adjustments to the deck, made the visual adjustments as well. Oh, by the way, the other thing I did, because I was using Slidev and I knew it's a popular tool, I thought, hey, there must be a skill out there for it. And there was, and Claude was already good at it. But after I installed that skill, it flew. It absolutely flew. So we've got that skill installed. Claude tightens up the visuals. It gives me a new iteration of the deck, deploys it to Netlify again, and now we go through that loop again. And I record, I give feedback, it adjusts the deck, and some rounds of feedback are like, okay, I'm not going to go end to end. I'm just going to practice these 4 slides and see if that flow feels right. Or if something feels weird, let's move slide 18 to number 11, and then we'll try 10, 11, and 12 and see if that feels right and kind of go back and forth. And so end to end, I probably only gave the presentation maybe 3, maybe 4 times, which is typical for me, but they were very focused and there just wasn't much time in between each of them when I usually would spend quite a bit of time. And so at the end, what do I have? I have this tight, polished talk. There's just way more going on in the visuals than I would have ever done before. Like, I'll give you a couple of examples. So this background here is a style I've been tinkering with a little bit lately, where it may be hard to see, but there are these dots, this dot pattern in the background, and they go from being transparent, translucent over here to fully transparent down here. So it's a little bit of a gradient of this background texture. And at first it came up as just solid. And I was like, I like the kind of fading out feeling. There's no way in 48 hours I would have gotten to that level of detail. And then this thing down here, I thought, why don't we have some sort of tracker? This is a short talk, but I want people to be able to follow along. And just little details of like, hey, I get an idea. I can just be like, boom, there's the idea. We're going to update 20 slides at one time. So that idea might be something like, one of the things that came up was, hey, we sort of have these sections throughout, And we've started numbering them. We can, and they're meant to be really sitting in the background, but then we use color to tie those sections together. So we've got our dark blue and our white, but then let's change our accent color as we move throughout the presentation. And so everything changes. We've got this thing that follows us down here. And so we just end up with this in this place where there's a lot of custom styling, there's a lot of custom treatment, and it just feels really, really good. And I love it. I'm definitely going to try this again. In fact, I enjoyed this so much that I started thinking, hey, when I record videos every week, it's nice to have drawings like this to follow along. But if I'm going to talk about some sort of theory or something about like that, let's just put a slide deck together. It's not going to take long. The deck part is the super fast part because I don't have to do that part. I've got to think about the outline and the content, and that's the stuff that takes a little bit longer. But that's what I tried this week. It worked amazing. I hope you can take something from that and adjust your workflow or the content that you've been creating in some way. I'd love to chat with you about anything you're trying in this area. See if there's something I'm missing that I could be doing a little bit better. But that's all for now. I'm Sean C. Davis. I'll see you next time.